Well, welcome everybody. Thank you for coming back to another episode of the Complete Student Podcast. We're so excited to have you here, and we're definitely excited for our guest today. This is Mark Krause. Mark, thank you so much for being here with us today.
You're welcome.
Awesome. And we are going to be talking about the subject of faith and education, and super important topic for our students. A lot of them are trying to understand what's the purpose behind going to school every day, or maybe post-secondary education. I know I've talked to a few students who've got ACTs coming up, and just trying to help them connect their faith to their education. And so just to start off, could you just tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, what do you do? And
Okay.
yeah.
Well, I've had my feet in the education world for most of my career, but also in pastoral ministry, and really believe that I was called into pastoral ministry at a very early age. And so I love working for the church, and I've worked for various colleges and universities. I still do some online teaching, but I'm working at a church in Papillion right now, Wildwood Christian Church. And I also do writing for publication. I write for Standard Publishing, which is part of David C. Cook, and I write adult Sunday school material. I've been doing that for about 20 years, and that's really that seems like, well, that's not that much, but they sell about 400,000 copies of their material. So there's still a market for things like that in some churches. And then I've also been a conference speaker and spoken at a lot of churches. I've probably spoken at maybe 300 different churches and a lot of conferences over the years. So I've just had a long career. That's why I have numbers like that, not because I'm anything special. But I believe in higher education, and I believe in education very strongly.
Awesome. What is your education background? What have you studied and your primary focus?
Well, I went to a private university when I first graduated from high school, and I was a music major. I played the violin, but I felt like God was calling me into full-time ministry, so I left and went to a Bible college and graduated, went to seminary, and after I graduated from seminary, my college in Seattle asked me to come back and teach, and so I did that. Although I've just really enjoyed being in church ministry, and I've done ministry on the side. And then I earned a PhD from Trinity Evangelical Divinity School in Chicago area. So that's my educational background.
Awesome. You kind of alluded to it a little bit. You talked about like feeling the sense of calling towards pastoral ministry and teaching, but what else would you say kind of drives that passion to want to teach, and specifically to just equip young people and as they prepare for their journey ahead of them?
Well, I don't know if it sounds trite or whatever, but I have always felt like I have a gift for teaching. So when God gifts you, you need to pay attention to that. It hasn't always been my favorite thing. You know, I really enjoy church ministry, and my first love is probably evangelism, bringing people to faith. Yeah. But He has given me many opportunities and led me to be a teacher, and I've taught for a number of different schools at the undergraduate and graduate level.
Yeah, that's awesome. And, teaching goes beyond just the classroom. It's pastoral teaching, which sounds like a big passion of yours too. And just kind of as you reflect back upon, your time as an educator, your time as a pastor, what would you say are some of the things that have played a key role into you wanting to be a professor, a teacher, all of those things?
Well, one of the key things always is the people that you have had as professor and how they influence you. And sometimes it's how you think, I could do that. In fact, I could do that better. And, and whether or not you have the interest in that, I think that teaching in higher education, which I enjoy very much, you have a long path of preparation for that. Yeah. And so you have to be willing to do that. I know we were just sharing about you almost finishing your master's degree. Man, that's a real commitment. Yeah. And yet it's also a way of really growing yourself and stretching yourself. And especially if you're doing that with a Christian school, your faith increases and goes in new areas and gets stronger in ways that you didn't expect. So I like seeing that in students. I like seeing the lights go on. I used to say when I was teaching full time that really had three things. I want students who love the Bible, love the church, and love Jesus, and not necessarily in any order. I want them to do all of those.
Yeah.
And that's always been really important to me. So when I see that happen, that's very gratifying to me.
Yeah. No, I totally understand. Sometimes when you have a really great professor, you can tell really loves what they're doing. It really does shape you as a student, and you see like kind of their passion maybe become your passion, and saying like, I really feel like this is something that I could be called to, or something that I could do, and all this. And so for you as an educator, how has your faith specifically played a role into how you enter into the classroom, how you approach students, and kind of how you just go about your craft as a teacher, as a professor, whatever it might be?
Well, I taught most recently at Nebraska Christian College, and I was the academic dean there. And I used to have people ask me, well, what's the difference between taking a class here and, say, at Metro Community College? Mm-hmm. And the difference is, if in some classes you might take the exact same class. You might take English 101, freshman English class, and might use the same textbook, might almost have the same syllabus at both places. But the difference is you always know, if you go to a Christian school, Nebraska Christian College, that your teacher's going to be a Christian. Mm-hmm. Is that going to be true at Metro? Maybe. But you don't know that for sure. There's no guarantee, and there's no requirement there to be a Christian to teach there. But I can't not take my faith into the classroom, because that's who I am. And so I get the criticism. I just preached at my church last Sunday, and I get the criticism sometimes, like, when you preach, it's too teachy. It's like you're too much like a college professor up there giving a lesson. I go, well, that's kind of who I am. And then I get the criticism in the classroom. It's like, you're too preachy. It's like you're preaching at us. You're too. Well, that's who I am. That's who I am too. I'm kind of somewhere in between. And I always thought that my job in the classroom was to help build up the faith of a student, never to tear it down. And some educators don't. They think you have to tear the faith down before you can build it back up. Well, it doesn't always work that way, because sometimes you tear it down and you damage it, and it doesn't get destroyed. Maybe not destroyed, but it doesn't really recover from that. I never wanted to be that person. Yeah.
No, that's good. And you talked about just kind of the difference between going to a public university or a non-Christian university, going to a Christian school. And again, I also went to a Christian school and going to a Christian school, and I see the value of it. But what are some of the subjects that you feel, because you mentioned, like, you get professors who have that same faith background. So there's that immediate connection between the two of you. But as you look kind of at the spectrum of education and what's being taught in the education world, what are some subjects that you really feel that young people specifically they need a better understanding in, or maybe they feel like there's a lack in the education system that they're missing coming out of their schooling, or they could use some more training in?
Yeah, so everybody graduated from high school will have holes and gaps in their education somewhere. Mm-hmm. And even at the very best schools, that's going to be true. So when you get to the university or to the college level, they're going to want to fill those things in, and there'll be different ways of doing that. But even if you have gaps and you're behind, let's say that even if you were homeschooled and you just didn't get very intensive education in certain areas, math or English or history or whatever, and you get to college, you can catch up really fast. Yeah. You really can. And if you have a good foundation of being able to read and write, it's hard to do education if you can't read and write very well, and you have listening skills, and you have some self-discipline to read the assignments and do the assignments, turn them in on time. What we found at Nebraska Christian College especially is a lack of what we called soft skills, that it's easy to teach academic subjects, and you learn lists of things, and you are introduced to new thoughts and new authors and everything. But the things like, keeping your calendar and showing up on time and showing up for class and being prepared and being courteous, and those soft skills that especially you need in ministry. Mm-hmm. But we also believe you need them in life. And anything that increases your communication skills, I would say, is going to make you more successful. I don't care what field you go into. You go into sales, business, education, coaching, whatever. If you can communicate
Right.
both orally, with in your speaking and writing, you're going to be more successful probably. At least you have a better chance of being more successful.
Yeah.
So those are the sorts of things that I think a good, broad, general education in undergraduate and trust their curriculum. It's been hammered out, but in English and math and science and history and those sorts of things, you need those things. Yeah.
Yeah, no. What you said about just students developing those soft skills, I've seen that so much, especially in the sense of communication. And, I have met a lot of young people who their biggest struggle is like picking up the phone and talking to someone, or actually having to physically go and have a face-to-face conversation with someone. And that's an area that, like, it just brings them a lot of anxiety to have to do that. So maybe you could speak to this, but what are some ways that, like, they can kind of overcome some of those fears, or maybe take steps in developing themselves as a communicator, just not necessarily in terms of like, oh, I'm going to go preach one day or I'm going to become a teacher, but just everyday communication and developing those skills?
Yeah. I'll say a little bit more about that in a minute, but let me say that your communication skills, what we ran into, especially the last 10 years or so in college work, is students don't know, for example, how to use email. It's like, I don't use email. You need to text me. No, I'm not texting you.
Yeah.
I'm not going to text you. In the business world, we don't text.
Right.
We use email. Whether you like it or not, that's the way it is. So if you say, well, I'm not going to do that, emails for losers, well, you just put yourself in a category of employment, of blocking yourself out of a lot of jobs. You better start your own company where all you do is text and not try to actually get a job. So I think those are the sorts of things that we have to learn, that what we were able to do in our family situation, among our friends, and maybe even in high school, if we get out in the big bad world, it's going to be a little bit different. And if we want to be successful, meaning I think for a lot of people, we want to have a stable job where we get good income and health insurance and those sorts of things. You want that kind of a job, you're going to have to just learn how to do these things. And I'm not a good phone person. I'm much better at email, and I like talking to people on the phone. I don't like returning phone calls, but I do it. I do it, and I return texts because that's part of my job. Right. And I'm much more. I like doing this. I like talking to you face to face. My son Jesse would say I'm a little bit extroverted, so that's kind of my personality.
Well, he's super introverted, so that works too.
Well, he's not as introverted as he thinks, but we are a little bit different in that. But I think you have to work on that. God can use introverted people too, and they can be very successful in ministry and in business. They just have to find the right place. One thing I was going to say, though, Jay, is that if God's calling you to preach or something like that, I've learned a couple things over the years. And one is, I really think if God calls you into ministry, church leader ministry, that for one thing, it doesn't go away. For example, if I go to a conference and there's big, inspiring speaker, and I've been conference speaker, I know how to do some of this stuff, and you almost manipulate people, and then you do a big altar call or something, and these people all come forward and dedicate themselves. I'm going to be a missionary. I'm going to be a youth minister or something, and then you go home. It's like, I don't think. Well, that wasn't a call.
Yeah.
If God's calling you, it won't go away. And then the second thing, if God calls you into ministry, and this has guided my life for 40, almost 50 years now, if God's calling you into ministry, you're never going to be satisfied doing anything else.
Yeah.
I've had opportunities to leave ministry and make a lot more money than what I made in ministry, but I wouldn't have been happy doing that. And God has always taken care of me and my family. And so I think you have to listen to those things. Sometimes you have to have people like yourself who help guide young people in exploring those. Those calls may not be as clear when you're 17, 18, 19, 20 years old as they are later. but you have to kind of keep those things in mind.
Yeah. No, I mean, that completely resonates with me. I know I've had seasons where I've stepped away from maybe the local church ministry and have like found my mind constantly drawn back to it. Like that's what I will read about in my spare time. That's what I'll think about. You know, that's the conversations that I'll have. And it's just like, I know that that's my calling because I can't seem to even break my mind away from thinking about it all the time. So I totally resonate with what you're saying. The other thing that I've really run into, and I mentioned it just kind of in the intro, but a lot of our students and students in general just like don't like going to school, right? Or they maybe started on a different path and post-secondary and realize, maybe education is what I need to do, but I just don't feel like I want to do it. And there's this sense of like there's a lack of value behind going and getting an education, a post-secondary education. So from your perspective, can you just kind of share like why is education so important?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of answers to that, and we've come through a really tough time. I just finished this week teaching a online class for a school in St. Louis that they didn't really know how to do online. And I mean, what they were doing was once a week we would meet for a 2-hour Zoom session, and it was sort of like classroom but Zoom, and everybody's sick of Zoom. Zoom is not a primo way of doing education. It's the least or the best thing that we can do right now in all the given things. And I think a lot of people are going to be really glad to get rid of Zoom because real online education, that's not how it works. Usually in other situations. So. It's frustrating because I've talked to, even in my church, high school kids that they're just so tired. I don't want to do this anymore. I'm just going to get a job. But I would say this, that the older you get, the higher it is, or the harder it is to get yourself plugged into a higher education thing, especially if you want to go on for a graduate degree, if you want to go on for a master's degree. And in general, this is a big, broad statement, but almost any college is better than no college, even if you don't get a degree. So if you decide, I'm going to go to community college for a year, pick up some classes, and those credits stay with you for the rest of your life, you can go back and finish that if you want to, or if you don't, you've done college, you've tried college, and it's not for everyone. And there are plenty of successful people out there who didn't go to college. But in general, it will increase your effectiveness and your marketability in trying to get a job and your resume and everything, and also your knowledge and your capabilities. So that's what college is supposed to do. It's not just some people just go to college to get away from home and party like crazy for 4 years. Yeah. Well, that's not really the reason either. It's too expensive. And I think the expense is a huge, huge issue. So I would, I was talking with somebody last night about how to pay for her child's education. And the child is only 2. So how can you do that? Well, I don't know if you all know about this. The state of Nebraska has a program where you can contribute to a college tuition fund, and I don't know very much about it, but I know they've just improved it, I think, last year or 2019 maybe, so that it used to only be you could put money in this account and it would grow tax-free, and then it could pay for your tuition. But now, and you had to go to a state of Nebraska school, but now I think you can go to any school and use that. So there are programs like that. If you're a parent, if you have some money available when your kids graduate, better than no money, and work hard in high school, get all the scholarships that you can get. There's a lot of scholarships out there, and try not to take out student loans. Yeah. If you can possibly not take out student loans. That's if you end up with even an undergraduate education with $50,000, $60,000 in student loans, that just cripples you economically for years. And I would really try to not do that. Yeah. So push for the best deals that you can get, and then realize that when if you're getting a big scholarship, that's a a blessing from the Lord, really, and take advantage of that. Get your full money's worth, even if it's not much of your money.
Yeah. Totally. Yeah. Just to continue on with that, what value do you feel like education brings, or what possibilities does that open the door to if you decide to take that step?
So higher education college gives you opportunities in a number of ways. If you finish a degree and finish a program, almost always it will qualify you for some type of employment that you weren't qualified for before. And, statistics would show that your overall income over a lifetime is going to be considerably higher if you have a college degree than if you don't. But the other thing that we don't talk about very much is the network that you develop, of people that you meet. And it's amazing how friends that you meet in college end up being your business partners or things like that, or help you find a job. The networking capability is amazing. I pastored a church in Los Angeles, right across the street from UCLA for a while, and it was interesting to be just real peripherally, but part of that UCLA culture. And I remember more than once running into guys who had played on the UCLA football team who were in the business community in Los Angeles, and kind of the whole deal was, if you played for UCLA and you were a starter, my firm has a position for you. You could be a stockbroker, or you can sell real estate or something. There would be good jobs available to you. So that's an extreme example, but it's really true that the networking that you develop in higher education will serve you really for a long time, maybe for the rest of your life.
Yeah. No, that's really good. That's really important for them to know. All right, I want to end on this. If you could go back in time to when you were 16, 17, upperclassmen in high school, what do you wish you could tell yourself then that you know now as it relates to education and higher ed and all of those things?
That's an interesting question. I'm so old, it's hard for me to remember when I was 16, 17 years old. I don't particularly regret any of the choices that I made. And I would say this, that when I was a music major for 2 years at private university, and I loved playing the violin, and just at the time there were a lot of circumstances that led me to go to Christian College instead and train for ministry. And literally for a while, I could not play my violin. I couldn't take it out of the case because it just made me so sad. And I thought God was calling me to give that up. I was willing to give it up for the Lord, but it really made me sad. And then I had an opportunity to play about a year later, and I remember even, I don't know if you can relate to this, if you play an instrument and I'm holding it when I'm waiting to play, and I can smell the wood and varnish smell in my violin. I hadn't smelled it for a long time. And it just brought back all of these memories. And I'm like, oh, what have I done? I should have gone, that my passion was playing, I wanted to play in symphony orchestras and stuff. Yeah. Well, here's what I'll say, is that whatever you've done like that, if you give it to the Lord, He'll give it back to you. And so I've ended up over the years, I don't regret at all the 2 years I spent being a music major and all that I learned there. And it's helped me in ministry. I played for 10 years in a big volunteer symphony in Seattle area called the Cascade Symphony, and did a lot of ministry there because everybody knew I was a minister and a college professor. And so I was like the pastor of the symphony. But the enjoyment that I got out of that, God has used that with me. So whatever skills, whatever training that you get, if you give it back to the Lord, He'll let you use it. He'll find a way in church to use that. I know you told me that you did some athletics in when you were in high school and college, and I'm sure you used that in ministry, right? Yeah. I mean, that's just God finds a way to use those things, and the church needs people to be willing to use those things.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, I did have an athletic career, but it's led to more injuries than I care to recall. So,
but
I think the Lord's calling me to stop using that.
But
I'm just kidding.
Even the injury experience can be used in ministry when you minister to other people that are going through those things. It's just amazing how God uses all that stuff,
Absolutely.
isn't it? Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Mark. I
Oh, you're
appreciate
welcome.
this time, just having this conversation. Like you, I love having these conversations, and I think that this time together is going to be super valuable for our students if they tune in, listen, and really just try to glean from what you were saying. So thank you so much.
You're
We
welcome.
appreciate your time, and we hope to have you back again.
Okay, that'd be great.
Awesome.
Thanks.
Thanks.